Hey everybody, just continuing the sort of update that I had put up from yesterday, except I'm just focusing a little bit on some fantasy stuff as well as looking at some brushes. It's a little unrelated, but I'd like to just shout out a particular line of brushes that I've had some success with and show some shield design that I've been doing with 3D printing. I've actually started to mess around a little bit with designing my own 3D designs and starting with some simple shields that I can use on my Oldhammer miniatures. And so I'm going to start with just what you have in front of you here. This may look really similar to the video from last week. If so, it's not a coincidence. I really liked that lot that I picked up last week from a gentleman locally here, where he had a lot of sealed, sort of older models. These are around 6th edition kind of GW stuff, which is what I'm going to be playing with my Beastmen, but as well I could use Orc and Goblins, but I am planning on using a lot of this stuff. Initially, I'm thinking Saga Age of Magic, like I talked about in that video. I kind of was kicking myself because he asked me, are you sure you don't want to get the orcs that I have with great weapons? Because they were really good deals, and I was clearly getting and interested in the metal Orc and Goblin stuff. And these are black orcs, so they're essentially, these two boxes on the bottom are black orcs that are just like the ones that I had last week, only difference being that they have great weapons. I guess the other difference would be, and I hadn't really looked at this, is it doesn't look like they have command, where they have a standard and a musician and things like that. Does look like there is a leader, a character, like a champion, I could be wrong. Maybe not. I don't know, I think so. But there is 10 in each box, and I was kind of kicking myself because not only if I ever wanted to use this for Warhammer would it be another great, 20 more black orcs of the kind that I have at such a cheap price, but also even in Saga, I haven't seen the Horde faction within Age of Magic, but I do know that there are many factions that have two-handed weapons, and you can, there's rules for that, and so I could essentially have units with two-handed weapons for orcs if I had these guys. So I was determined to go down and pick these up, and I let him know that I was going to. But then in the meantime, he put up more posts, and he had a brand new Beastman chariot in the shrink wrap, which really just, these are basically the same exact kind of line of the ones that I just painted for the most part. And so this is a Beastman chariot, and so I got that as well. And then he had 2 blisters of Ungors. So these are Ungor spearmen. There's 4 in here that I already have, but I'm just adding to it another set of command, which is great because I have a fair number of Ungors, and I could split them up into 2 different units when playing the Warhammer Fantasy in particular, as well as levies for Age of Magic and things like that. Now, before I get into the shield design and start talking about that, he ended up giving me another one of these just for free, threw it in because he found it, and these are just like the ones that I just painted, which is great. I'm going to make a little room here. I wanted to show off some brushes that I've really come to like recently, and I find that most of the time when I see people do videos on brushes, I'm just going to fade out here for a second and fade back in at a better angle. So as I was saying, I find that most of the time when I see wargamers show off brushes or people do reviews, typically they're on the hobby brushes, which are generally a bit more expensive, and it can range from anything from looking at mid-tier, what I would call mid-tier Games Workshop, Privateer Press, maybe Army Painter type brushes, which I like using and have used throughout most of my career as a painter, to the sort of higher end brushes that are going to end up costing quite a bit more money. The names they kind of escape me. Winsor & Newton, I believe, is one of them I've used. They kind of escape me sometimes because I don't tend to buy those brushes anymore. I like to keep a fine brush, and sometimes I'll buy a high-end one. Sometimes I'll buy like an Army Painter, really fine scale brush for details, for eyes, and I always like to have something like that, but it's really not by any means my workhorse brush for whether it be base painting or even doing glazing and things like that. And so I've always been one to try to find things that are equally or even better for less money. And a little ways back, I noticed at Walmart they had a large selection of different brushes, but I saw this kind of pack here, which I essentially have been using for a while now. You'll see they're all kind of, you can tell, they're all kind of getting a little beat up. Well, the dry brush and the larger one there look fine, but this is a bit of a workhorse. I think, oh, what size is it? It's a size 1, and I've been using it as a bit of a workhorse brush. The tip's starting to go away on it, but I've been using it for a while. I've really enjoyed them. I've found they've really held their point really well. And so it's this Bria Reese brand. I find it's a bit of the handle's a bit of a synthetic handle, so I don't find that it swells with water in the way the wood has sometimes on these if you leave your brush too long sitting in the water when you're painting and cleaning different brushes as you go. But I found that the fibers on it have really overall held a tip for very long and were really easy to maintain. Much easier than sometimes the mid-tier brushes that I'm most accustomed to painting with. And so I went back, and actually they weren't there at times, and they had these other brushes which I've used in the past and I didn't like. But then recently I went back and they had them again, and they have this set of round brushes, which comes in a nice little Ziploc bag, so it's not just plastic you throw out. You could even potentially keep this for your brushes if you wanted to. And then what they didn't have last time was this value pack. Now, these were really not that expensive. I mean, we're talking like $5 like for all of the brushes or something, or this one might have been $8 or $9 for the value pack. Oops. And so I really found these were keepers, and so because I saw them, I picked them up again. I think that some of these larger ones I could use for dry brushing or even terrain for the bigger one. But what I'm really most interested in is this sort of 2 smaller dry brushes and all these sort of last rounds that I would actually get in this pack here. I just kind of wanted to grab it just because it was there. And so I don't have a whole lot to say other than this. I just wanted to really give people a pointer if you happen to see these, and if you're of like mine where you don't want to spend a ton of money and you want something that works well. I've found that particularly like some of these smaller ones, like this one here in particular, I found these to be as good as the mid-tier brushes that I'm most accustomed to using. And yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say. I mean, like, this one is starting to wear out now. I know there are folks that basically say that their brushes last them forever. Because they take care of them. I use a brush soap and I clean my brushes every time I sometimes even often in between I will do a soap clean sometimes, but I think I take care of my brushes. I do probably get the paint into the top where you're not supposed to more often than I should, and then do some cleaning, on them. But they don't last me forever. I mean, brushes are disposable for me. For folks that they last forever, I don't know how they do it. I've listened to them. I've tried to do the same thing. They just don't last me forever. And so these kinds of things are great for me. I still will occasionally buy a really higher end brush for doing certain tasks. But I find that those ones will last me for many years, just because those tasks usually aren't part of the whole workhorse process of painting for me. So yeah, Bria Reese. I'm sure there are there's a name for this type. These are synthetic, and I know people tend to prefer the natural fiber, and I like them too. And I've had a lot of problems with some synthetic brushes, but I'll have to say, I wasn't really sure whether these were synthetic or kind of natural. I mean, they definitely behave differently because they hold a point better for me than the natural brushes sometimes, and they actually are a bit stiffer at first. But then as I'm using them, I mean, I find they work really, really well, despite being a synthetic brush. And so there's a name for them. I think it's on here. It's called Gold Taklon is the name of the type of fiber, and I found them to be really good. All right, so that's enough of brushes. I'm going to move on to Shield Design. I have had a little bit of caffeine in order to get a bit of a painting splurge done here. So, as you remember, I did these sort of shields on my Beastmen recently, and I'm of the opinion that it's really not worth trying to look for these things on eBay and trying to buy GW shields. Like, I still have more shields. I've gotten some more shields with stuff that I even picked up today. I'll still paint and use the GW ones. But I wanted to try to see what it would take to start designing my own shields and 3D print them, because it just is so much cheaper. Now, I would say that I have not developed the perfect one. I'm going to show a couple images here of just what they look like on the software. I used Tinkercad, which works right in your web browser. It's made by the same people that make Autodesk, and it's free. And I found it really, really easy to use and intuitive. And I've used Autodesk and had a bit more trouble. I'm not sure I had the patience or the time at the time to really dedicate to learning. Or AutoCAD, is that what it's called? I think it's called Autodesk, not AutoCAD. But I didn't really have the patience or the time to really dig deep into that program, where I found Tinkercad to do something like these shields to be really easy. I was able to really pick it up and design them in one evening. Well, with some tailoring the next day. I had a couple different versions that I ended up producing. This one is the first one, and I believe it's a bit closer in its dimension and its thinness to the shield that I just showed. The only problem with it is I did put this hole in the back, and with how deep I put the hole, and if you notice I put some wood panels on the back too. I put the back flush as opposed to having a rim like on the front, and the reason for that is anything you build on a 3D printer like this, if you have a rim, then it's going to have nothing to print on, and you could put supports if you wanted, but I found it was just easier just to put a rim on the inside to give the illusion of that brim, and just do my boards. I gave it a little hole like you would have in like some of your old models to not only insert like a metal shield into, or just to have as somewhere to grab like on an elbow or something when you're putting them on there. I found these to be really usable. I mean, they're not primed and painted yet or anything, but I think actually I could get away with using these. I have a batch of these that I will use. I tried tailoring it a bit, and one thing I did try to do is I did try to put, if you can notice there, some studs on the outside of the rim. You can probably see them there. They didn't project out to the level that I would have liked them, but they're there. They'll probably catch paint. The reason why I don't believe they actually ended up protruding enough is I think it's just purely how big they are. Like, these are really small. You can see like my fingerprints here, and like these are actually pretty small, like those little circles. And it really comes down for me, I think, to the size of the nozzle on my printer. And as you saw in the pictures, they kind of stood out, but when you try to bring it into reality, there are some physical constraints on my printer with the size of the nozzle and just how small this is getting. And so I almost think I would need to oversize these to actually get them, like, make them look bigger in the design to get them to be bigger in reality. And I haven't really experimented that much more with it. I did one more try here where I did try to oversize them. And what I did here is this shield is a little thicker, just slightly, than that one. And I did that mainly in order to try to get rid of that piece in the center where you see the hole, because I did keep the hole. And I think by the time I put paint on it, you wouldn't see it. Where here it's a little bit more. Basically, this is a little shallower. Probably requires a little cleanup on the inside. Oh gosh, sorry about that. This one requires a little bit more cleanup on the inside, in the same way probably that I would need even to clean any model up. I probably need to just clean that out a little bit. I probably could just do a couple of twists with a drill, like a hand drill, just to take that out. I think the back looks nice, I think, even though it's not the main part I want to show. I think the rim here it's very pronounced, which will look good. I don't think it's too much as far as the size of the shield. I haven't determined which one I'll go with yet in the future. But as far as the little nubs, in some ways, even though they were bigger, they're almost less apparent to me on this one. They're still there, but I almost have to paint them just to see how that kind of comes out. I normally don't paint them individually. They're just something just to catch the metallic paint with. So, but I think this will actually end up being, these both will actually end up being really nice to use for these style shields. And then I've got this one here. And I did kind of make this to be pretty much in scale with it. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think, but I thought I'd share that. It's sort of my first step of ever doing some design. So literally going from design concept to a 3D printed object. All right. Well, I hope you guys are having a good one, and talk to you later.